Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. I'm Anthony Skinner, producer of the show. We've got another great one for you today. I'll let Ian do the introductions, but before I pass it off to Ian, I want to remind you to join the conversation with us on social media by following Ian at Ian Morgan Cron. That's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also follow us at Typology Podcast. That's Typology Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well. Hey, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner's short introduction today. I know you're going to enjoy this episode. And now, here is the host of our show, Ian Cron.
Emily, welcome to the show. We are so delighted that you're here.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
And I am so excited about your book, The Next Right Thing. And can I tell you why?
Yeah, I'd love to hear why.
Okay, so this morning I was in a very bad space. I was in a bad 4 space. And you know about that because you're a 4.
I do.
And I was in that space where like the world was collapsing. I was in that space of, and it's all my fault.
Right.
Right. And then, you know, that sort of like that, the introjection of the 4. And I was in that place where I'm like, you know, why can't I ever pull it together? Why am I always disappointing people? You know, blah, blah, blah. You know, the script runs on and on and on. And I called my AA sponsor, who is an amazing human being. And at one point he just said to me, Ian, simply do the next right thing.
Amen. I love it.
All right. So tell me, the name of the book is The Next Right Thing. What's the meaning of the title and why did you write it?
Great questions. Well, you mentioned AA, and I had a teacher once who said that AA is really the most successful discipleship program in America because, you know, thinking about our churches could learn a lot from AA because they have such a great track record of forming people, of bringing about transformation in people's lives. And doing the next right thing is one of those things. You know, it's one of those mindsets. My dad's an alcoholic as well, and granddad before that. And so I come from a long line.
Yes. Alcoholism doesn't run in your family. It gallops.
Right? Oh, gosh. Yep. And we wonder why we turn out these ways.
Exactly.
You know, but so growing up, you know, AA was kind of always a part of my subconscious, though I didn't really understand a lot about it. It just was sort of floated around because thankfully, my dad's been sober for 30 years. So, you know, there's recovery there. But all that to say, clearly I didn't come up with the next right thing. That is something that has been quoted and passed down by wise people for many, many years. You know, this concept of doing the next right thing. I know I've read Mother Teresa has said it, Martin Luther King Jr., Anne Lamott, lots of really smart and brilliant writers and thinkers and people and world changers. But for me personally, this concept of doing the next right thing has in so many ways changed my life. Because I think, you know, talking Enneagram as a 4, I tend to, you know, when I'm in this moment, I'm here and I'm absorbing everything of this moment. And it can be difficult for me to look off into the future. But when I do, I see it all at once and it can be really overwhelming. And that idea of just do the next right thing has been really freeing for me. And so it came about really from needing to make a big decision in my life. And I started to pay attention to the ways I was paying attention. So I had the decision to make, and that was sort of out here. But then on the inside, you know, reflecting and thinking about self-observing, if you will, I thought about how this decision was captivating my attention. It was causing me to listen in ways I wouldn't normally listen, to talk with people in ways that I wouldn't normally. And so I started taking notes, and I thought this idea of decision-making is such a transformative part of our lives. If it weren't for decisions and choices, what would we ever need to do? Like there's no change that would ever need to happen. I feel like there's so many things that decision making does for us. And doing the next right thing is a decision making lifesaver for me, honestly.
So you just, a little light went on for me. So 4s in health go to the high side of 1. And it seems to me that's a one question, right? Like
Absolutely.
What's the next right thing? So when a 4 or any number, I think it's in health actually, but for a 4 particularly, just do the next right thing is a question or a spot they may come to when they're in a place of good health.
Yes. And I have experienced that. And when I am not asking myself that question, I'm trying to carry everything at once, and I'm carrying also all the responsibility for it because clearly it must be my fault, all my inability to handle.
Yep.
So the next right thing, it feels like a healthy question. It's a life-giving question for me.
Yeah, because otherwise you feel like you're under a waterfall of information flooding you and opportunities and problems and stuff. It's like, take a deep breath, like Thich Nhat Hanh. Breathe, smile, go slowly. And then we'll add, then do the next right thing.
Yes,
Yeah?
I love it.
Okay, so you said you were faced with a decision, and I'm just curious to know, what was this decision that was so monumental that you start writing about it and your attention migrates toward it all the time?
Well, it was about 2 years ago, and I was deciding whether or not I wanted to go to grad school. So I was thinking about if I wanted to get my master's degree or not. And it's a very privileged choice. Like, let's just be real. This is not a life or death situation. If I didn't go, everything would have been fine. No one was going to, die. But for me as a mom of 3, I've got, three teenagers, and I'm married and life and all the things. That's one of those decisions that sometimes those are the kinds that trip us up, I think, because it's sort of a luxury. And you feel like if you do it, then what are you going to be saying no to or turning your back on so that you can fill the space with this new adventure, this new thing that you might want to do that quite honestly was it was for me. Definitely it will enhance my work, I think. And it would, there are things, but I struggled with feeling like, oh no, what am I going to be taking away from my family to move towards this decision to go to school? And so that was honestly the decision. And it was so annoying. I annoyed myself. I got on my own nerves because I couldn't make it for so long. It felt like I just had this chronic case of hesitation where I couldn't move. And so I started realizing, you know what? If the deadline's not here yet, I don't have to decide yet. So what's the next right thing I can do to make this decision towards this decision today? And it was, well, I'll have a conversation with this person, or I'll read this article on this thing, or, I'll have so there are little things that you can do, I think sometimes that we forget because we're so focused on the giant thing.
So you just made a really wonderful, important point that I think is helpful for every Enneagram number, but particularly for 4s who get emotionally flooded. We have the most fertile imaginations on the Enneagram. And so, a lot of data is coming in and feelings are coming in all at once, and we can get flooded. And the question, what's the next right thing? Or the words of wisdom, just do the next right thing, could be so powerful, but it's for every type. It's perennial cross-type wisdom. Like, we could all stop for different reasons as each Enneagram type to ask, what's the next right thing?
Yes, it's so true.
What, in your mind, because you were talking globally about decision making, like can you deconstruct decision making for me? Like what is it?
What is decision making?
Yeah, because
that's
apparently
such a 4 question.
I know. Apparently, I need the help.
Well, here's what my learning and observation of how I will simply say is that I think we tend to hyper focus on the decision itself. And the more I think about decision making, the more I'm realizing that it's less about making better decisions and more about learning to make decisions in a better way, because that becomes more character shaping than just focusing on the decision. I think when I focus on the decision, I'm really living my life out here, whereas I love to live my life from the inside out, from a place of truth and wholeness, and sort of activating all parts of myself, my head, heart, and my intuition. And I can't do that when I wait till decisions come to me and then I react to them. Instead, I think it's really important in the decision-making process to live a life of reflection so that I can respond as the person I most fully am. And a way of doing that is learning to live a life of doing the next right thing, starting with, honestly, and we can just kind of get into it, thinking about making decisions. I think a really important part of the decision-making process that we often ignore is naming the unnamed thing. Naming the unnamed things, naming the narratives that are happening beneath the surface. Because sometimes when it comes to a decision, like a simple thing, like where to send your kids to school or whether or not to take this job offer, there are narratives happening beneath the surface that if I don't take the time or I'm not self-aware enough to name them, they will inform my decision, but I won't become more fully myself. And so recognizing what is the story that my life is telling me beneath the surface? And how might I actually be focusing on the wrong decision? Sometimes I realize I'm trying to make a decision about a thing that actually isn't the point. It's actually a whole bigger thing over here. So all that to say, I think naming the narrative is a big part of the decision-making process that is often ignored or not thought about.
As you were saying that too, I think what can cloud the landscape for us as we sort of look at a decision is, everything launches narratives or movies. I call them, I'm making movies in my head about what will happen if I make this decision or yes. Or if I don't make this decision. And it can lead to a kind of paralysis. And I think, fours are pretty imaginative people. And so, really creative Bergman films can go off, in the head that are not always very helpful. So let's talk about different Enneagram types in decision making.
Let's do. That sounds fun.
Right? Because I think this is going to be so helpful for every single type, because every type on the Enneagram makes decisions differently. Right?
Right.
So you got any observations about it?
Well, I have observations. I can't wait to hear yours.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. So let me just unpack a little bit of stuff, and then we can maybe we can jump in on it together.
That's good.
All right. So we all have centers of intelligence, right? We have head, heart, and gut. So 8, 9s, and 1s, you folks are in the gut triad. 2s, 3s, 4s, you're in the heart triad. 5, 6s, and 7s, you're in the head triad. So as I think about decision making, I think obviously 8, 9s, and 1s are going to tend, not exclusively, but tend toward making decisions instinctually, right? At some level, it's going to be coming from that space. 5, 6s, and 7s, they're going to approach decision making from a thinking space first, and then primarily 2s, 3s, and 4s from a feeling space, right? So for example, knowing how does this help with decision making? Okay, so you and I are 4s. For you and I, the way that this, these different these centers of intelligence can help us. You and I feel first. We feel things first. We support our feeling with thinking, and then what's repressed in us is doing. Mm-hmm. That's what's repressed. The goal of knowing when you work with centers of intelligence, right, or balancing centers, is you want to identify your repressed center, which for us is doing, and not take your feeling center down to match it. You want to exercise your doing and bringing it up into balance, right, with your other two, so that you're thinking and doing and feeling in equal measure. You see?
Yes.
Instead of it being a hierarchy, you want to bring everything up into balance, right? And so I love what you just said, because, force in the face of a decision could get all feely. And it's like, no, now just do the next right thing. You know what I mean? So that really spoke to me. So let's just kind of run through the numbers and talk about how each one might make decisions. I think for a 1, faced with a decision, maybe the first thing that they would think is, what's the most principled, ethical, good, right thing to do? right? If they're faced
Yeah.
with a decision, two alternatives, it's going to come down to what's right, what's principled, what's the best for everybody, or what's, what is the virtuous good thing here, right? So that would be, it would be a just do what's right thing, right? For twos, I think a lot of the decision would be around people and relationships. How is this going to affect people? I think they might ask themselves the question, what if, making this decision a particular way upsets people? That's going to affect their decision making, right?
Right.
I think, and so one of the questions that they're going to toy around with is how is this going to affect the relational sphere, right? My relational sphere. I think for a 3, they're going to ask, what's the most efficient choice? What
Right.
is, what's the solution? They don't want to talk about feelings. They don't want to talk about what you think. It's like, well, it's going to be more like, what's the most efficient solution? What's going to get us across the finish line fastest? Where we want to go next, right? I think for 4s, this is my experience. And by the way, I have a manager who's a 3, and he actually knows this about me and has to work around it with me. He'll say, we need to make this decision. And I go, all right, well, I need to think about it. I need to muse about this for a little bit. And he looks at me like he just sort of, because I think 4s, when they're faced with the decision, can go there.
Yeah.
It's how we perceive decision making, right?
Which when you say it, it sounds like a thinking space. But when I do that, because I do the same thing, for me, it's a thinking about whether or not I will feel like this decision is going to reflect who I most deeply am.
Yes, or I think yes, and then what was I going to say? It's like I'm thinking about feeling.
Yes.
And then my feelings gets in the way of my doing.
Right.
So it's like I just get lost in let me ponder this decision instead of going to the high side of one and saying, nope, let's just do it. Let's
Right.
just get going, right?
Right.
What does a 5 do when they're making a decision? They're going to say to you like, I need all the facts.
Yes.
Tell me, I just got to please give me all the details. So we're launching a new product this week, and so in one of our emails that we send out, I learned this week, because I don't know anything about this world, that you want to address an audience that tends to be what they call the methodicals. Do you know about
Yes,
this?
I do,
I didn't know.
yes.
I don't know anything about it.
Uh-huh.
I was like, really? So, and I said, well, who are those people? And they said, they're the people who need all the details. They need to know.
They want it all.
They want it all. Those are 5s.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. I think it's 1s probably. I think 6s. I mean, it's people that say, I need to know all the facts before I make a decision. But 5s in particular, I think. For 6s, the way they perceive it is, maybe, well, first of all, as we all know, right, for 6s, decision-making is hard. Mm-hmm. It is very hard. So what a 6 will tend to do is think that, what's the worst thing that will happen if I don't make a decision?
Right.
Right. So therefore, I have to go outside myself and ask other people who seem to be, have more of a sense of authority or know-how or knowledge, what they think I ought to do, what decision I ought to make. Right. What were you going to say?
Well, just my mom's a 6, and she would make decisions only based on what's the worst thing that could happen, or what's the worst thing that has happened in the past. So every decision, it seemed like, was often just preventing the worst. I'm going to make a decision that's going to prevent the worst from happening.
Right. So I think a 7 is going to start thinking, when faced with a decision, well, what are all the options?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, show me the buffet of options here that from a mistress I can choose, right? I think an 8 would say, oh, no, this is simple. Just, make a gut decision. Just
Right.
make a gut decision. And this is why 8s are big decision makers. I mean, they're just like, boom, do it, right? And I think with 9s struggle with decisions for different reasons than 6s do. But they have trouble with decisions as well. They can kind of get stuck in this space of, I think, can I put it off, or can I wait until somebody else makes it? Can I, because when you make a decision, it might be unpopular or cause conflict, which is what a 9 wants to avoid.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So isn't it amazing? Every type makes decisions in different ways.
Right. And every type, one thing that I think is interesting to think about with these types in decision making is when you've made a decision that you've later regretted, what was the reason for that regret?
Ooh.
And for me, I think about the different spaces, like I talked with a friend of mine who's a 1, and she said, I was mad I didn't trust myself more. That was her place of regret. Whereas for my husband, who's a 2, he would say, well, it negatively affected people who I love. And so that was my reason for regret. For a 3, I wonder, I don't know about a 3, but maybe, it made me look bad, or it failed. I couldn't spin it into a success, perhaps. But I know for someone who's in the head space, so that maybe they made the decision too quickly and didn't know all the options.
Right.
That could be a reason for regret. Like, I learned something later that if I only would have waited, I could have had that piece of information.
Right.
So it's interesting to think about it from those lenses of why, like for me, when I look back and regret, it is because I feel like a decision I made didn't fully reflect what I really thought, because I have this deep desire to be understood, right? And so if I make a decision based on something that isn't fully what I believe or a value-based, then I regret, like, even if it wasn't wrong, that's difficult. And then I think there are people who don't regret. They're like, what are you talking about, regret? It's over. I don't even think about it.
Those are 8. I mean, an 8.
Right.
I mean, an 8 is like that. I think. It's like, well, for bad or for worse, that was it. Let's go. Let's move on. It's like, regret. 8s do have regrets, but they're not very often. They don't share often what they are necessarily. A young 8. But listen, I want to come back to this issue about different types and decision making. I want to learn more about the book and what's happening with it. And but first, I want to talk about my friend and Michael Cusick and his organization, Restoring the Soul. One of the lessons I've learned, Emily, over time, I'm a therapist, one of the things I've learned is that not everybody benefits from a traditional kind of weekly hour in a therapy session, which is why people can go like to couples therapy or personal counseling for months or even years and never really get anywhere or make any progress. So this is why I'm such a fan and a believer of the intensive counseling process at Restoring the Soul in Colorado. So Restoring the Soul was created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help people or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over like a 1 or 2 week time period. Michael and his team know that sometimes you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough. For nearly 20 years, they've helped couples and individuals transform their relationships and their lives. So if you are looking to get out of the rut you're in and you can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation, 303-932-9777, and learn how their intensive counseling process can jumpstart your journey or launch you to a whole new place. And as a special bonus for just our typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
Oh, that's good. Those unnamed narratives.
Exactly. Exactly right. So, different types in decision making. I think this is really important for folks because obviously we're faced with numerous decisions in the course of a day and in the course of a life. And some of them really are monumental, super important decisions. I like the idea that decisions aren't sort of a one and done moment a lot of the times. They're incremental. And when you chunk them down by just simply saying, do the next right thing, it's made then over it's got a longer tail, it's not like a boom, like a safe falling out of a 4th-story window, it's
Right.
like it's a little bit more chunked down and then a little less threatening to people, or so I think that's fantastic. When you walked away from finishing the book, what was like the big aha, like sort of thing that you're like, this is what it comes down to? Obviously do the next right thing, but was there something else about decision making and different kinds of people that maybe across types that you would say, here's the nugget?
What a great question that is. This book started out as a podcast first. So it's the Next Right Thing podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of the podcast and hearing from listeners and what I started noticing was happening. So I say that because the book is just now coming out, but this conversation has been going on for a couple of years now, 1.5 years. So I've been already getting feedback from people. And the feedback that I get, that I'm getting from listeners and readers, is so interesting to me. And it is, I will hear, people will tell me, thank me for helping them make their decision about, I listened to the podcast, or I heard this episode, and we decided to move forward with this house decision, or with this vocation, or we moved across the country. And I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. I have never, not one singular time, told one human person what to do in a situation. I don't know. I haven't heard their thing. I'm not really, truly, I'm not helping them make the decision. All this concept is doing, the gift of doing the next right thing, the gift of that mindset, that posture, is helping people create space for their own soul to breathe. No matter what number on the Enneagram they most identify with, we all need that space to clear the clutter and to get in touch with what's happening beneath the surface so that we can connect the dots for ourselves. And I think that's one of the key bedrocks for decision making that I've discovered is we live in a worn out world, and it's run by worn out people. And when we have a big decision that we're faced with, it can derail us really in many ways, which is why I think it's so important to develop a practice of listening to our own life, as Parker Palmer talks about. Let your life speak. It sounds like that's just for the contemplatives, but wouldn't we all do well to have a little bit of contemplation in our lives to help us form some type of foundation for decision making? Because it really is about the person that we are becoming.
So good. So let's talk about maybe recommendations we would give to different types as they were in the middle of an important decision making process.
Ooh, that's fun.
Right? Because as you were just saying, like, I've never told anybody, what decision they ought to make, right?
Right,
right. And I think that's wise. We would ask questions. If I think a good friend or a counselor would say, well, I'm not going to make that decision for you, but here are some questions I might ask to help you in the process of making your own decision, right?
Yes, right.
So you're fairly familiar with the Enneagram. If you were thinking about ones, perfectionists, do you have any advice that you would give a one making a decision?
I think I love your point about asking questions. I think a one likes to know what to do. They want the clarity. And I think that can be a gift, but it can also be a burden when clarity, it's not time for clarity yet.
Absolutely.
And so encouraging a one to be willing to carry the mystery for a little bit of time, which will be so uncomfortable, I would think, for a one.
Yes.
It's like they want to make the decision now, but maybe it's not time. I think that might be my first question would be, is this the time to make that decision? Do you have to make it now? And if not, can you wait in this gray space without going crazy?
And yet at the same time, because I think these are all like, depending on person dependent, sometimes ones will delay or procrastinate making decisions for fear they'll make a mistake.
Right. That's a great point.
So they'll get paralyzed. And they'll kind of get this thing going where it's like, well, what if I make the wrong decision? What if I make a mistake? And so at some points, I think, with a one, you might ask, let's make to say to one. Let's say it is the wrong decision. Would that be so bad?
Right. Invite them to relentless kindness to themselves, which I think is difficult for a 1 to be kind to herself.
Right. Yep. Now, so I'm sticking in that space here, right? Of the gut types, the body types. If you were an 8, in my mind, and I'll turn to you in a second, I would be like, when it comes to decision making, and they're like, I'm having trouble making a decision. 8s oftentimes don't ask that question enough. They tend to make a decision and inform you later. And I have with 8s, I've had to say, slow down, think through the consequences of whatever decision you're about to make, because you are so from the gut when you make decisions that sometimes it's, there's a price on the other side of the decision that you haven't baked into your calculations. Is that your experience with those kinds of aggressive 8 types?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Slow down.
Yeah, for others it's speed up, but for 8s it might be slow down, think before you make that decision. How about 9s? What do you think about 9s in decision making? How would you counsel a 9 in the face of a decision?
Oh man, I think the 9s I know anyway are so interesting because it's not that they don't have opinions or even know or even have things they want to do. They're just willing. They're just so open with it. It's all they hold it lightly, and so but they want to be heard. They want to know their opinion is heard. Like they want to know. And so I think when it comes to making a decision for a 9, maybe I would encourage a 9 to trust themselves. And that might be difficult for a 9 to do.
Yeah. So, and what I hear, because I also think that's good advice for a 6, right? Trust your gut, trust your own ability your own decision-making abilities. Like you don't have to go outside of yourself to get to some, person onto whom you have projected authority, or some belief system onto which you have projected authority. Trust what's going on inside and make a decision from that space. My wife's and I, my daughter's and I think a lot of times with 9s, I guess one of the questions I would ask would be, is that decision you're making based on what you really desire? Or is that decision based on what you think is going to keep everybody happy and harmonious?
Yeah.
Is going to create the least amount of conflict, I think that's a question I might come up on a 9 and go, what do you really desire? What do your desires tell you? And that's going to, again, a lot of these questions are going to baffle types because they're going to be like, you're going against my established pattern of decision making or the way I respond to decision making. And it's like, well, that's what a good question should do. Is kind of mess around with you, right?
That's right.
All right, so we did 1, 8s, and 9s. Let's talk about people in that in the heart space. 2s are faced with a decision, and they come to you. A 2 comes to you and says, "Man, I don't know. I'm faced with this decision, or I think I'm making it this way. What do you think?" A 2, the helper. What might you say to them?
Well, it's interesting you asked the 9 the question, what is it that you want? Because I would ask a 2 that question too, because I think they are so aware of the needs of other people that I think a 2 sometimes might tend to worry that what they want is selfish, is getting in touch with that.
Yep.
So that might be a question I would ask a 2.
So what's really great is that you just drew this connection between 2s and 9s. And both would have to ask the question, what do I want, right? What do I desire? This is why 2s and 9s often get mistyped, right? Because there's a little bit, they oftentimes appear on the outside they look very similar at times, right? They're accommodating, they kind of are, but it's a very different interior world, right? And I guess, for 2s, yeah, I would ask the question as well, but I also might frame it this way. What do you need? Like, what are your needs? Are you factoring your needs into this calculation, or are you just meeting the needs of others here? Is it based on meeting other people's needs, or are you also taking into account that you too have needs, right? And how will this decision affect you? Is it an upside for everybody else? You're meeting everybody else's needs, but it's really going to cost you. And again, this is going to freak a 2 out because they're going to be like, wait a minute, I don't think this way normally. And I'd be like, exactly. Go against the grain of how you normally do things sometimes in order to figure out what's the next right thing to do. You know?
Preach.
Bring it. All right, what about 3s? They're a little tough, I think. What would you do? A 3 doesn't, like, again, they're pretty confident, assertive types. They don't often necessarily go out looking for, information about how to make a decision. But if they did, what would you say to them?
This one is tough for me, honestly. I think one question I might ask is why do you want to do that thing? If it's a thing they want to do, if the decision has to do with making a decision of moving forward towards something, because I think sometimes 3s might be looking for something that maybe they don't even realize they haven't. How would I say it? The achiever energy of a 3 could be looking to achieve a thing just for the sake of achieving it without it having a grounded reason. And maybe if they look at it, they realize, maybe I don't actually want that thing after all. So maybe getting beneath the motivation for the achievement. Because I think if a 3 got to a space where they were asking about a decision, that's an interesting space for a 3 to be in the first place. Similar to an 8, what you said, an 8, I don't know that they would ask that question really.
I agree. I think that for 3s, if a 3 is making a decision, I would ask the question, so what's the motivation? Like, what's motivating you in a particular direction? Is it because you want to look good? On what basis are you making the decision? Is it in self-interest? Is it in order to get ahead? Or is it really in the best interest of the whole community? Does it serve everybody? Are you thinking of more widely beyond yourself here as you make that decision? I think that could be something really important for a 3 to consider. Let's go to talking about 5s. Ooh, 5s. 5s are actually can be pretty good at decision making.
Yeah, if you were talking to a 5, what would you ask a 5 in the making a decision?
What would I ask a 5? Well, I might say, how much time are you spending researching the decision?
You would ask them for the receipts.
Yes, I would probably say to them,
That's good.
Eventually you have to get off the internet and stop researching which car to buy and go buy the car.
Just pick a car.
Yeah, have you put a clock on how much time we're going to spend doing the research yet? I think that's what I would do with a 5. As they're facing a decision, I tell them to stop thinking so much and just go do it.
That's good. That's good. And what are you trying to avoid? I think sometimes it can be telling that that a 5 might be trying to avoid a risk, interpersonal risk, that they maybe aren't aware that that's what they're making the decision based off of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we all have these biases inside, that are affecting decisions that we're unaware of. And I think that's so much a part of what this is, what we're driving at here is like, are you self-aware enough and have enough self-knowledge that you understand how do I make decisions? What are the downsides and the gifts that I have when it comes to making decisions? And how can I fend off the downside? Right? So a 5 could actually tell themselves at some point, okay, I've been researching too long. They shouldn't have to wait. It's like, a 3 should be able to ask themselves, a healthy 3 to ask themselves, okay, I got to make a decision. I'm good at making decisions. I just have to ask myself, am I making this decision in service to the community, or just in interest to my own, perhaps, need to succeed, even if maybe it costs other people, so forth and so on. I think with 6s, that's a really interesting one, because one of the hallmark features of 6s is they struggle with decisions. And I think one of the questions I might ask a 6 is, as they were making a decision, would be, what are you most afraid could happen? What do you think?
Yes. What are you afraid of? Or what's the worst thing that could happen? And I would also want to ask a 6, what's the best thing that could happen?
Oh, so good.
To begin to cast a hopeful vision that they can actually use their imagination in restorative and redemptive ways.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. I want to commend that to all you 6s and those of you who love 6s. Like, 6s often forget past successes when they made decisions and it worked out, or when it didn't work out and they survived. That everything was okay. Well, you made the wrong decision, but hey, we're still here. So, I think for me with 6s, saying, what's the worst thing that could happen? Yeah. What's the worst thing that could happen?
And actually name it. Yeah.
I think that could be really, really great with a 6. Yeah. All right. You got a 7 in your life?
I love 7s. 7s are, I need 7s in my life, and I have them and I love them.
You and me both. I have a 7 son, man. He's the best.
The best.
Right. I have a 7 son-in-law too. I actually I actually picked up another one on board, and I love having them around. So good.
What would you ask a 7?
Well,
go.
7s can be, when they're not very self-aware, 7s can be a little narcissistic. 3 people tend to think that 3s are the narcissists when they're unhealthy on the Enneagram. I don't agree. I think it's the 7s. That's
interesting. Tell us why.
Yeah, well, because it's all about fun, and I don't want anyone to shut down my limitations or my options. And so they don't like being told what to do or how to do it. They get very, very defensive. And when a 7 makes a decision and you get up in their grill about it, the rationalizations that come out are amazing. The litany of why this is the right decision, because it's like it just comes out like a defense attorney. They just will go on and on and on. And so, maybe I'd ask a 7, are you making this decision because it sounds like the most fun thing to do? Or are you making this decision because it's the best thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question.
And so, are you buying this car because it'd be really a fun thing to do, but without thinking about what the cost might be for others? In the same way I might say to an 8, you know what I'm saying? It's like, because 7s are impulsive.
Yeah.
They can make impulsive decisions. They can make bad decisions because it's like Johnny on the spot. Well, that's a great idea. Let's jump off that cliff into the water without thinking, how deep is the water?
Right. Let me think this through.
Yeah.
Which I admit, sometimes I envy that, the impulsivity of some of the other types that I don't seem to have. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, if only I could just do that. But you're right. There's a downside.
Well, yeah, because sometimes what a 7 will say is spontaneity is actually impulsivity.
Right. I guess that's 2 different things. Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. And they can have really different outcomes. Really, really different outcomes. And so we've already touched on 9s, right? Did we do the circle? The circle of life?
Except for 4s. Did we talk to 4s?
Oh, we didn't talk to 4s.
Get left out all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Ian.
Okay, hold on a second. I just want to say that something's up. Something's going on.
In the water.
Something is going on.
As a therapist in the room, what I'm feeling is that was called resistance. That was called sort of, I don't know, like some kind of weird, strange, convenient overlooking.
Overlooking.
Yeah. Man, what would I tell a 4? We got 3 4s in the room. We have nobody to tell the 4s. Well, I'm trying to think about what's helped me. Okay, I will tell you this.
Yeah.
When I've had to make decisions, I've often gone to 5s to help me.
Yes, me too. My sister's a 5, and I call her my no mentor because she helps me say no to stuff.
Right. And the other thing that they do is they cut through all your feelings, because I get all up in my feelings when I have to make a decision.
Yes.
And I need a 5 to say to me, what's the information? And I'll say, well, should I move here or move there? And they go, give me all the information. And I go, well, here's what I know. And they'll be, I'll get back to you. And about 2 days later, they'll say, I thought about it. I did a little research. And I believe from a very objective point of view, which will be always what you get from a 5, it'll be very objective. and they'll say, I think you ought to do this based on the information you gave me. I think you ought to do this. And I'll be like, thank you. And it's awesome. So I need to rely. I often will go to a 5 and say, I'm all up in my feelings. Can you tell me from an objective, non-feeling point of view, what's the right next step?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I will say this, if I could
Please.
defend the feeling space, is that, like we said earlier, I do think that there's no hierarchy of what's a best way to make a decision as far as from your head, from your heart, or from your gut. And growing up, somewhere along the line, I picked up that feelings are not okay, and that I need to, they need to be pushed. And I what I'm learning as I'm growing now, this is, it's a process, but I am learning the gift that our feelings can bring to us, even in the process of making a very logical, informed, grown-up decision. That feelings might not always tell us the truth, but they do give us important information. And so for me to not discount my feelings in a situation is so important in making healthy, wholehearted decisions, because I can say, okay, when I think of this particular thing, I feel a sense of lightness, and I want to pay attention to that, even in my body, because I go to a body space in some ways when I feel like I'm really paying attention, I'm really self-aware, versus feeling like this feels like a dark gray, like this feels like a rainy, like this does not feel right, and so though I might not make a solid decision based on colors, for example, I do think they can bring important information to the table.
All right, this is an awesome place for us to end. Okay, so every type on the Enneagram, listen to me. Number 1, ask yourself the question, how does my type affect my decision making? You know what I mean? Like just to reflect on it. Like how has my type affected the way that I make decisions, for good or for ill? How does it help? How does it hinder? Just good reflection material, right? But the second thing I think that I would bring to it is what you just said, which is, okay, we all got 3 centers, but one's dominant. Right? So if you're a dominant, in the gut space, 891, consider the thinking and heart space in addition to the gut space. If you're a 234 in the heart space, as you make a decision, bake into your calculations, what your gut tells you as well as what your head tells you. Like, think about it, not just, feel about it. If you're in that 5, 6, 7 space, you're a thinker. You tend to make decisions, let's say, dominantly out of your thinking space. You need to listen to your gut and to your feelings and not discount them. How can we bring all 3 of these centers into balance as we make a decision? We draw on the wisdom of all 3 centers, thinking, feeling, and doing. And then I think if we do that, we have the best chance of making the right decision. What do you think?
Absolutely. You know what? You're not going to believe this, and we did not talk about this beforehand. I created a whole class to help integrate those 3, and you get it for free when you order the book. So it's called Discern and Decide, and it's all about designing a rhythm of life that helps to sort of integrate those 3 places, because I think we make our most soulful decisions, like you said, when we're able to lean on all of them.
Emily, this was so good. I really enjoyed this. Tell everybody where they can get your book, The Next Right Thing.
If you can get it anywhere books are sold, if you go to nextrightthingbook.com, you'll see all about the book. You can take a quiz, actually, to help you discover your decision-making style. So if you're not sure, am I head, am I heart, because like you said, it is Enneagram, but maybe not every decision we make always comes from that center. So we have a fun, silly, but fun and very highly scientific quiz.
Yes. But it's been scientifically validated using predictive analysis and algorithms, right?
From all of my friends, yes.
Yes.
But that's where you can find that, nextrightthingbook.com. And then I'm Emily P. Freeman everywhere, Instagram, all the places.
Man, this was so good. And I'm so glad I made the decision to have you on Typology.
It was my next right thing.
It was my next right thing to do. And I apparently I made it out of all 3 spaces because it was the right one. It was a wholehearted decision. Emily, thank you for being on. Your book is fantastic. You are a wonderful human being, and this is a really important topic that I think people have overlooked. So thanks for taking on the mantle and running with it. And all you folks out there, listeners of Typology, We love you. And don't forget the words of the great Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. See ya.